Yep.
Share my screen. Okay, welcome everyone. So this is detoxification, a deep dive. And a little about me. I'm a registered dietitian. I have a master's degree in nutrition from Bastyr University. I've been a dietitian for almost 10 years, and my area of expertise is gut health. Today we'll just do, I did my introduction, then we'll go through the lesson, and then we'll do some questions and answers. And of course, this presentation is for educational purposes only and shouldn't be considered medical advice. So after this presentation, you will know what detoxification is, what it entails. You'll know some foods that contribute to the detoxification process and ways to minimize your exposure to toxins, which is very important. So detoxification, it's the body's physiological process of converting toxic chemicals, compounds, and hormones into less harmful substances. And a little bit of definition here. So toxic chemicals could be a toxicant, which is a harmful substance made by humans or that's put into the environment by human activities, or a toxin, which is a compound made by bacteria, plants, or animals. So that's like an endogenous substance in the body, like hormones, for instance. But during this presentation and everywhere else that I've heard, everyone just kind of uses the word toxin to refer to both, so biological and chemical. And the organs of detoxification work efficiently as a whole to reduce the body burden of toxic load. And those include the liver, kidneys, large intestine, the lymphatic system, and the sweat glands. And we know all that we know about detoxification because of studies on how drugs are metabolized and cleared from the body. And so that's called biotransformation. So detoxification, biotransformation, they're sort of the same thing. Okay, where are toxic substances found? Pretty much everywhere. But we're going to be talking about food, not so much air, water, and just personal care products and things like that. But I gave some examples here on this slide. GMOs, gluten, sugar, alcohol, heavy metals, lots and lots of plastics. AGEs, that's advanced glycation end products. My last talk that I did on inflammation, I had a slide about that. Those are dangerous substances that are made when you're like char grilling or getting those black marks on meat. And then hormones, of course, can be toxic if they're in the body too long. ABXs, those are antibiotics. And then dietary fat from animal sources. So the animal is bioaccumulating toxins and it's actually stored in the fat, just like humans. So if you have like a fatty cut of meat and it might contain more toxins than say a lean cut of meat. Okay. And so your detox capacity sort of depends on many different things. Of course, if you're living in close proximity to chemical and industrial manufacturing plants, you're going to have increased exposure to toxins, right? If you have a nutrient deficient or a poor diet, detoxification is a nutrient dependent process. So you're going to have less capacity to detox. If you have high stress, that's increasing the utilization of key nutrients, such as like B vitamins. So you're burning through those. And so you'll have less capacity to detox. Sleep is a key time when detox and repair occur. So poor sleep is gonna hinder your detox capacity. Chronic disease is costly in terms of nutrients, again, burning through those nutrients, as is inflammation. And then gut bacteria help to produce vitamins, digest foods. It's all essential to the detox process. So if you have dysbiosis, where there's an imbalance of good versus bad bacteria, this is going to hinder detox significantly, and it could be a cause of inflammation. So there goes the cycle, right? And then sweating is one of the ways of eliminating toxins from the body. So a lack of physical activity would hinder detox. Regular bowel movements are imperative to the detox process. So someone who is constipated is reabsorbing those toxins through the stool that's not moving through the body. And then age, think of our bodies as vessels, and an older body would most likely be filled with more toxins. And then, of course, there's genetic SNPs or mutations, and these can significantly impair detoxification capacity. And that's, you just inherit those genes, right? So that is a pretty complete list. Okay. And what happens when we have a lack of detox? Well, disease. Toxin exposure leads to DNA damage. And this is just, this is not a comprehensive list, but these are the biggies. Definitely like lead exposure has been implemented in cardiovascular disease, ingested arsenic in diabetes. We see some mercury in Parkinson's, things like that. And who is at risk? Well, pretty much everybody, but definitely couples trying to conceive. So research indicates the metals and chemicals like hormone disruptors that are found everywhere are actually damaging fertility as well as babies in the womb. And then multiple exposures, obviously like toxic load would be greater with multiple exposures. A compromised immune system would be much more affected by chemicals. And then a compromised nutrient status would have much more difficulty clearing those toxins because, as I said, detox is a nutrient dependent process. And then people losing weight. So toxins are fat soluble, and people who are losing weight are liberating these toxins from this fat cells and putting them into circulation where they can actually do damage. And then older individuals, as I said, about being sort of our bodies being a vessel, older individuals are more likely to have more toxic bioaccumulation. So how do we optimize our detox capacity? Well, we optimize nutrient status, especially the ones involved in detoxification, and we'll talk about what those are. And then we also have to reduce our toxin exposure. So this is just sort of a detox overview. This is a picture of the liver, and the liver is the hub of the detoxification process. So when the liver is neglected or overburdened through increased toxic load or lack of nutrients, it becomes sluggish, congested. And as you can see here, we have toxins on the left, which are going through two distinctive steps or phases. And then after those two, there is the elimination phase, and we can look at each step in more detail. So this is phase one, where toxins like alcohol, paint fumes, pesticides, some medications are going to be first handled by a group of enzymes known as the cytochrome P450 family. So if you've ever taken a medication and on the label there was a warning about drinking grapefruit juice, this is the pathway that it affects. So grapefruit juice actually slows this pathway down, meaning that some medications may take more time to get broken down and therefore stay in the circulation longer. So slowing down the pathway might not be a good thing when you're taking certain medications, but actually in other situations it can be beneficial. And this is because the enzymes here that convert fat-soluble toxins into smaller, like water-soluble substances in order to enter the next phase. And this is done by oxidation, which actually results in free radicals. So let me talk a little bit about free radicals. I'll give a little science lesson. So a free radical is an atom or a group of atoms that has at least one unpaired electron, and it's very unstable, highly reactive, and in animal tissues, free radicals can cause cells to be damaged, and it can accelerate the progression of cancer, cardiovascular disease, age-related diseases. So this is a potentially harmful situation if highly reactive substances don't keep moving through that detoxification pathway to be eliminated from the body. So that is why it's also important to increase antioxidants for protection, especially polyphenols and flavonoids. And polyphenols are phytochemicals, that are bright in color, and they protect plants against UV radiation and even viruses. So think of foods that stain. So beets, turmeric, dark berries like we have here, those blueberries. And flavonoids are just a class of polyphenol, and those include like teas, soybeans, legumes, cacao, parsley, thyme, celery. There's many others, but that is why it's highly recommended to get at least 7 servings daily of like a wide variety of colorful, brightly colorful fruits and vegetables. And the wider the variety, the better, because they're each going to have individual nutrients. And I just wanted to backtrack for a moment. So back to phase 1, some of the nutrients that you need here are those B vitamins, glutathione, branched chain amino acids, the flavonoids and polyphenols like we talked about, and minerals like copper, zinc, magnesium, and then vitamin C. So foods would be legumes, leafy greens, brightly colored fruits and vegetables. Can't stress that enough. Even eggs, fish, shellfish, meat, the protein for those branched chain amino acids. Okay. And then on to phase 2. So we've gone through phase 1, we get some free radicals going, and then we've got to push it through phase 2. So it's going to take those water-soluble metabolites from phase 1 to be conjugated, and it uses 6 different pathways. And this phase requires sulfur-rich foods like garlic, onions, egg yolk, cruciferous vegetables, it's a big one, protein-rich foods for amino acids, that's imperative. I often see like the detox juices being sold as like, and there's no protein. So we're missing that key ingredient. I think that's a big mistake when a lot of companies market detoxification products and they don't include a protein source. And then also important are glutathione rich foods. And that includes asparagus, avocado, walnuts, cabbage, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, again, lots of cruciferous vegetables. And it's very, very common for individuals to have a suboptimal phase 2 process, typically because of the lack of sufficient intake of all those nutrients that I talked about. And it's, of course, dangerous because those metabolites from phase 1 need to be moved out. So you may activate phase 1 easily by having like a morning cup of coffee or an evening glass of wine. However, if you don't have sufficient phase 2 conjugation going on, you could suffer the results of these toxins still being in your system hours later. And you might have symptoms like insomnia, hot flashes, night sweats. It's starting to sound like menopause, but you get the idea. And then phase 3 is the final phase, and that's basically transportation of phase 2 conjugates to the kidneys, where urine is excreted, or out with the bile, which is produced in the liver, stored in the gallbladder, and that's where elimination in the form of a bowel movement will happen. So phase 3 requires good bile production. The more and more I learn about bile in my trainings and teachers, I mean, bile is going to be like the big thing. I think everybody needs good bile production, and you also need a good squeeze from the gallbladder to get a good flow going, and then also proper hydration and good functioning of the GI tract. So if you're not having a daily bowel movement without constipation or diarrhea, you definitely need to make an appointment because you could have underlying causes such as gut dysbiosis, lack of dietary fiber, even a mineral deficiency, probably magnesium, as most of us are deficient in magnesium. So that was sort of a little bit how detoxification in the body works. And now I'm going to talk about minimizing toxic exposure just out and about. And so that includes air, water, food, cookware, cooking methods, dentistry, personal care products, cleaning products. I'm not really going to talk about air so much. Air is really hard to control, but I'm going to skip ahead to water. And so I have here, water is tricky. So if you live in a place where you're concerned about water, I would definitely have it tested. But first and foremost, I think we need to minimize or eliminate plastic water bottles. You should never drink out of plastic water bottles. that goes, I feel like, without saying, but also you should refrain from using like plastic lids or straws, like to-go coffee cups with hot coffee. That lid, it's in a paper cup, but that lid actually has plastic in it, and you're drinking the hot coffee, which the heat is making the plastic sort of come out into the liquid, into the hot liquid, and into your mouth, and then into your gut. And then straws too. And then there was one study where like the repeat opening and closing of caps on plastic water bottles they found that it caused high accumulation of microplastic particles around the bottle neck, suggesting that one should not reuse a plastic water bottle. And if reused, one should not drink straight from the bottle. So I thought that was kind of interesting. There's so much about plastic out there. I could have put 5 million slides on here about plastic and done a whole talk on it. And I would encourage anybody who's really interested in what plastics are doing to the environment and our health. There's a doctor, her name is Dr. Shauna Swan. She's highly entertaining, has really good wit. She does lots of interviews. There's one actually with Joe Rogan. I'm not a huge fan of Joe Rogan, but her interview with him was particularly good and very entertaining, and shocking. If you want to get freaked out, I would listen to it. So a study of tap water samples from 14 different countries found that the US had the highest contamination rate, with 94% plastic fibers found in tap water sampled. These were plastic fibers were found in tap water in samples from the US Congress building, US EPA's buildings, and the Trump Tower in New York. Very interesting. So opt for glass bottles instead of canned. Those canned waters usually are coated with BPA or some sort of polymers that are leaching into the water. And then also consider a water filter. I like the Hydrovive brand, but there's tons out there, and you can do your research on those. So food. So nearly 70% of the non-organic fresh produce sold in the US contains residues of potentially harmful chemical pesticides. And that's according to the Environmental Working Group's analysis of the latest test data from the Federal Department of Agriculture. It should be noted that the USDA doesn't test for all pesticides used in crop production. So high levels of glyphosate can be found in several grains and beans like oats and chickpeas. And they found tests found glyphosate on 63% of corn samples and 67% of soybean samples. FDA did not test any oats and wheats, and these are two main crops where glyphosate is used as a pre-harvest drying agent, resulting in contamination of foods like Cheerios, granola. So that's yet another reason to minimize processed foods and artificial sweeteners, which are detrimental to the gut microbiome. And then you'd want to make sure that you wash your produce thoroughly, not only for pesticide residue if you're not buying organic, but also for microorganisms, because that can be a source of toxin burden too. So if possible, buy organic. I like the Environmental Working Group's Dirty Dozen and Clean 15. They'll tell you which, every year they come out with a different analysis, and that's very interesting. And then I didn't put this on the slide, but I thought this was shocking. A study of sea salts purchased in the US found that 12 brands of salt contained microplastics, and the one that tested for the least was Hawaiian sea salt. So maybe that's something to watch, I think. So also fish is a big one. So I just included this from the EPA. So avoid high mercury fish such as shark and swordfish. So larger fish tend to bioaccumulate heavy metals more than smaller fish. And canned light tuna has less mercury than, say, canned solid tuna or canned albacore. So that's important to note. And if you have any questions about this, you can refer to the EPA site on mercury. That's where I found this chart. And then cookware is a big one. This can be a source of toxins. So you should use pans like cast iron, Le Creuset, All Clad, or some brands that are pretty good. Use your non-stick coated pans sparingly. And if you do, because sometimes, cooking an egg, you kind of need that non-stick surface. I like ceramic, and there's a brand called Green Pans that are pretty good. People tend to like those, and never use those, metal utensils on the coated pans, which can damage that coating. And if it is damaged, throw it away or contact the company for a replacement. You see that all the time at rental houses, like that you pull the pans out and they're all chipped up. I don't know what people do to them, but don't use those pans, please. And then as far as food storage, this is also a huge source of toxins. So it's better to use like something like beeswax or those reusable silicone bags instead of plastic wrap. And then using glass storage containers instead of like plastic Tupperware. Buy glass instead of cans. That's for, food. So all those canned products that you're buying that has tomatoes in it or beans is coated with some sort of plastic polymer on the inside that can leach into your food. And never, ever, ever heat plastic containers, even the ones that say microwave safe, in the microwave. You don't ever want your food touching hot plastic. It's totally leaching everything into the food. So when it says microwave safe, that doesn't mean body safe. That means it won't melt in the microwave. It has nothing to do with safety of eating it. And then cooking methods. I talked a lot about this in my last talk about inflammation. So choosing low, slow, and moist cooking methods rather than like browning and burning, because of course it'll cause that advanced glycation end products that I talked about earlier. So if you're losing color, you're losing nutrients. That's sort of the rule of thumb. So you want to cook and prepare your food to maximize your detox potential. And maybe that just means changing the toaster setting so that your toast isn't so burned in the morning. That could be step one. And then, of course, don't exceed your smoke points of oils, because actually that creates free radicals. And we talked about free radicals earlier on in this presentation. They can cause tissue damage. And then using water, like poaching methods instead of oil, that's a good method of minimizing toxic exposure. And then I wanted to touch on fermentation is a great way to prepare foods. And it's actually beneficial for the gut microbiome. And not only that, it actually upregulates that phase 2 detoxification that we talked about earlier, which is so important. And then I wanted to include dentistry in here. So if you have amalgams, they may be contributing to your toxic load. And interestingly, I actually didn't know this, but what's going on here, I always thought that it was mercury, leaching into the mouth, but it's actually mercury vapor from the amalgams being inhaled and then absorbed through the lungs and then entering the bloodstream. And then this is really interesting. One study found that women who flossed with Oral-B Glide floss had higher levels of a chemical called perfluorohexane sulfonic acid in their bloodstream than women who didn't use that type of floss. And that chemical has been implicated in tissue damage and cardiovascular disease, I believe. So pretty dangerous. I really like Dr. Mark Burhen. He's askthedentist.com. He has tons of good information about toothpaste, different kinds of floss, toothbrush recommendations. That is my go-to for all my questions, mouth and tooth related. And then again, Environmental Working Group, a shout out to them. They have a great list of personal care products. So each day, the average American woman uses about 12 different personal care products on her body, containing an average of 168 different chemicals. That is a lot of chemicals. So I really like the detailed information that Environmental Working Group produces on their Skin Deep site. It's got ingredient information on skincare, sunscreen, makeup. It's very clear which they do a rating of each product, so it's very clear what's safe to use. And then they also have a guide to healthy cleaning, which is great because cleaning products really put a lot of toxins into the atmosphere and on surfaces. So basically, in summary, we want to minimize toxic exposure through water, food, cookware, dental and personal care products. And we do that by choosing low mercury fish, buying organic when possible, and definitely avoiding plastics. We want to increase our consumption of brightly colored vegetables and fruits to like 5 to 10 servings a day is the recommendation. So I hit it at 7. Lots and lots of cruciferous vegetables. I like cold preparations and as well as hot, so that you get both. And sometimes cruciferous vegetables can be really hard on the digestive tract. So you can choose arugula would work. You could get a clamshell of pre-washed arugula and throw arugula on everything from breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then you can also try fermented products. Those might be a little bit easier on the gut. And then you could also do broccoli sprouts, which are really easy to make at home. They're like a superfood and totally easy on the gut. And then you want to aim for like at least 35 grams of fiber a day. And I didn't say this earlier, but that is because fiber acts as a binder in the body. And so it's going to help shuttle the toxins out of the body and into the stool and eliminate it completely. And then when you're increasing fiber and protein, you want to increase water too. So you want to make sure that you're sufficiently hydrated. And I included a protein-rich diet here, and you want to make sure that you're digesting your protein adequately. And then definitely sweating regularly. That could be exercise, it could be saunas, and then managing stress, because high cortisol is going to sort of blunt the effects of the detoxification process. And then getting adequate sleep, because again, sleep is where we do most of our detoxification and repair. So that's about the summation of it. Here are my references. Anyone have any questions?
Could you put the reference list back up?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
It's very small.
That's okay. Thanks.
Yeah,
and the phase 1 chart.
Let me go back so we can look at it together. There we go.
Yep, because I wanted those nutrients.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
And then you were talking about grapefruit influencing things.
Yes.
I'm totally grapefruit intolerant. Is there, what is it in grapefruit that might be causing that?
Your intolerance?
Yeah. I mean, I've got about an hour before I have a migraine. I get blisters on my skin and it turns brown. I mean, it's bad.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Yeah, it just sounds like you must be very sensitive to grapefruit, and it happens with the fruit and the juice.
Yeah, any way I touch it or drink it, eat it, whatever.
Huh, interesting. And not with other citrus fruits?
To a small degree. If I get lemon or lime oil on my lips or my hands and don't wash it off immediately, I have issues.
Yeah, it sounds like you have a sensitivity to it. Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. But there are other foods that I mean, there's tons of foods that affect this phase 1. There's a compound in grapefruit called naringin, I want to say naringin, and that is what alters that cytochrome P450, slowing it way down. So that's why there's always those warning labels on the medications, because it'll keep those medications in circulation longer. So that
Right.
might not be, might not be advisable, right?
Right.
Yeah, but there's tons of other foods that upregulate phase one or inhibit phase one. And I will say this: so when working with somebody, this is sort of a broad overview of detoxification. Like these are just things that the average person can do on a daily basis, right? There might be people out there that need a whole lot more help, supplements, a very in-depth detoxification protocol. And I will say, when you're doing a detoxification protocol, typically the practitioner will start with optimizing the elimination phase first to get that drain open, because what you don't want is to start at phase one or phase two and then the person can't eliminate those toxins. So you usually work backwards. So you go elimination, then you optimize phase two for a couple of weeks and make sure that's really like kicked up a notch, usually with supplements, and then you do phase one. Typically, and this is a vast generalization, people have a pretty fast phase one, but their phase two is sluggish, and then elimination might not be so great either. So that's why it's pretty common to see practitioners work backwards. And then even further with detoxification, you don't want to start a really intense detoxification protocol unless you have adrenals under control. So if your stress response is all over the place, you don't want to go to detoxification. It's just going to make things worse. So you really want to get someone on a good stress management program, and then also healing their gut, which kind of ties in with that elimination phase. Yeah.
Okay. Great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. The healing the gut is the issue for me.
Oh, oh yeah. It can take a while for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me see if I can